What's the good word, Josh? Your boy DKB here. So I've been really thinking about our quarterback room and ultimately how we can best try to address these, right? I haven't reviewed everybody yet, but I don't love the look of a lot of the day 3 selections where I think we should ultimately start looking at, unless you just get a major slip. I did have a mock draft where we took JJ McCarthy in the third, for example, but realistically, I wouldn't want to do that either. Too many other pieces on offense that we can try to improve, right? Obviously, you would expect Aaron Rodgers to be healthy, but as we've seen, we need that quality backup quarterback. So free agency is the other route, right? And, I love the options that may potentially be out there, like a Jacoby Brissett. You can imagine Jimmy Garoppolo will probably end up hitting free agency after, his PED disaster. And there's a few other names that are going to pull up out there, right? Obviously, we love the Gardner Minshew's that may show up, etc., etc. But between cost value and ultimately, if we do need to go the trade route, a quality backup quarterback generally is going to cost us about $8 million plus on the low end. Or if you want to talk about a trade, generally is probably going to be somewhere between a 3rd and 5th round draft pick. But there may be a cure here for both situations, right? This would require a trade, but the potential trade value is low and the contract is low. So I've been looking at Washington Commanders Sam Howell, right? He's in a pretty disastrous situation that's not caused 100% by himself. We'll kind of talk about his situation for a little bit and kind of how things can translate and work out for the Jets in an ideal world. But Connor Hughes from SNY ultimately has some thoughts on this to kind of encapsulate everything pretty well, right? So he says, if available, though, I prioritize him over anyone else. Sam Howell proved this year he can play. There are flaws to his game, but none where the season is lost if he has to play. He's also cheaper. Howell would have a cap hit under $1 million each of the next 2 years. That matters to Woody Johnson and the Jets. There are those in the Jets building who believe he can play too. Maybe 2 years learning behind Rodgers really unlocks his potential and he ends up being his replacement. He did throw for 3,946 yards and 21 touchdowns on a terrible Commanders team. The key will simply be compensation. The Jets should do this if all it takes is a pick on the 3rd day of the draft. Howe is just as good of an insurance policy as Gardner Minshew or Jacoby Brissett. Now, the highlights from that entire, script there, if you will, was obviously the cap hits under $1 million for the next 2 years. That's going to be the best value that you can find through free agency or through any other trade routes that I'm aware of. So that's already a huge feather in Joe Douglas's cap if he can pull it off. The second piece is going to be the value that he's going to bring, right? Former 5th round pick in the 2022 draft. 2023 stats, not eye-popping, but for a guy that, again, was in a disastrous situation, he served himself pretty well, right? 3,946 yards, 63.3 completion percentage, 21 touchdowns. He did follow that up with 21 interceptions, which I didn't see if that ended up leading the league by the time the season was over, but at various points, he definitely led the NFL in this category. Then he added in 263 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns to kind of add a cherry on top in terms of some of the mobility that he brings. So when I take a look at it, 2 years in the league, he's bringing NFL level toughness, right? We'll talk about some of the pros of his game here, but you take a look at that Commander situation, right? What exactly are we dealing with here? Because why would we want a guy that's led the league in interceptions for the majority of the season? Why would we want a guy that obviously the team is going to seriously consider moving on with that number 2 pick in this year's draft and get themselves a Drake May or a Jaden Daniels to pair up with new head coach Dan Quinn? They also have that new GM in place. They also have the new ownership, right? So you kind of want that fresh coat of paint, if you will, for that franchise. So I'm assuming they are going to go quarterback in the draft. Plus, again, with everybody being new, there's really no allegiance to how in that building. First year starter, right? He actually got the opportunity here, but there was a lot of miscommunication and issues, right? You had, for example, Eric Bieniemy. Bieniemy was a guy that you heard before the season even kicked off. Players had an issue with because he felt like he was too direct, too attacking, right? Practices resembled maybe practices of old times, right? Which many people felt could have potentially violated, CBA rules and all that kind of stuff. I remember reading that, he ended up talking with them, discussing, his passion for the game, why he's conducting practices the way he is. He's trying to get the best out of these players, etc., right? But then those same issues creep back up. And even furthermore, you had players like Logan Thomas. I know there was a guard that was calling him out as well because essentially they abandoned the run for the year, right? Sam Howell was a player. Again, keep in mind, only 2 years in the league, including the previous year he just played. He's leading the league in NFL passing attempts, right? And you do have some interesting options in the backfield with Antonio Gibson, with Brian Robinson. So it's not like they just had nobody they felt comfortable toting the rock. So it ended up being a complete embarrassment. You add that to the fact that Sam Howell was on pace to be sacked more than any quarterback in NFL history between that Commanders' offensive line. So to see that he still was able to put up 20 plus touchdowns, almost hit 4K yards. I'm not a guy that cares about the yardage so much, but we haven't sniffed 21 touchdowns in 2 to 3 years time. So we're not in position to really argue much with what's going on here. It's interesting to me and kind of funny because I did point out at a few points last year. Keep in mind, we're not ranked dead last in a lot of these categories. Situations could always get worse somehow, and Commanders would be a good look at that, right? Not to crap on them or anything, but facts are facts here. So you pile into the fact that the last couple of games where Sam Howell wasn't the starter, many people will tell you that Jacoby Brissett definitely outplayed him, and I think that's honestly fair. And then to further add into the Bieniemy drama, you had the fact that there was rumors out there that Bieniemy didn't even want Howell to be his starter. He preferred Jacoby Brissett, and the new regime kind of, potentially pushed Howell onto him to determine what they were going to do in the draft in terms of getting a new QB. But what are the pros of the Jets picking him up? Based on what we saw last year, it wasn't great, but it wasn't absolutely terrible either. You're looking at a guy that could be a mid to, I won't say elite, but definitely high value backup quarterback, right? He has traits, tangibles, things that you love seeing from his first season starting that you feel you can really build around, right? You take a look at the fact that he's only 23 years old. It may potentially only take a day 3 pick, right? Keep in mind, he was a former 5th round pick. If you don't believe that the positives outgain the negatives, then you would say maybe somewhere between a 6th and a 7th, maybe a conditional 5th can get this done. And I would take the leap of that, right? Sam Howell over a lot of these guys that are going to be there at day 3. Joe Milton's probably the biggest name that a lot of people are going to want to compare. Not even a conversation to me, right? I'm going Sam Howell every day. He keeps his eyes downfield. He has a strong enough arm. He's shown NFL toughness with the beating he took behind that Washington's line. Underrated mobility. Looks to attack the deep to short area of the field in progression, which is something you're going to see a lot more out of a guy like Aaron Rodgers, right? Definitely a difference in style and traits here for sure. But it would be a nice touch to see that we don't have a quarterback that's just looking to check down and dump things off consistently, especially when we do have options that are going to be available. Off-platform throws are solid, so this isn't a guy that, you aren't going to be able to get some off-schedule plays with or, work some bootlegs, some play actions with and get him to work within his natural skill set. And the biggest knock may be he'll succeed more in a vertical passing attack than he would in a West Coast scheme, any kind of offense where the goal is to try to control the ball, right? And that's just something that he can develop into. But what his skill set is and what he would naturally succeed in the NFL, you would look at a vertical attack. But ultimately, this is a guy that I really, really love. If Sam Howell truly does become available, and I would imagine it would be before the draft, right? I think you have to jump on this option. If I'm Joe Douglas, I'm hitting that phone already to kind of figure out what it would take to potentially get him in the building. So yeah, I don't know. Ultimately, that would kind of be my plan A right now, right? Unless you do have Jacoby Brissett and, these Gardner Minshew's that are out there. But ultimately, Sam Howell was kind of option 1A, if you will. Finding a Jacoby Brissett or, signing a Gardner Minshew, something like that would be option 1B or 2 for me, 100%. But again, between the cap value, between the upside of Sam Howell, and I think he will welcome sitting at this point, right? If nothing else, other than to refresh his body from the beating that he's taken. But new environment. Nothing to say that we will ultimately succeed here, but it would be nice for him to actually learn under an elite veteran. High respect in regards to Jacoby Brissett, but obviously we're talking about two different tiers of players here. We've seen the quick improvement out of Zach Wilson when he was paired with Aaron Rodgers prior to injuries and all this other stuff that took place. So I would imagine you can see Sam Howell kind of progress by leaps and bounds, but ultimately, let me know what you guys would think. Commanders, are you letting Howell get out of your building, or do you prefer the new rookie quarterback in Jacoby Brissett? Jets fans, would you be comfortable with Sam Howell, or is there another quarterback option you prefer, either via draft or via free agency? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.